Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to Sister Wives with Mary Jane K. Today, I'll be breaking down Season 2, Episode 5, Wife Number 3 hits Sin City. If my YouTube listeners could please like and subscribe, I would really appreciate that. Let's get into this episode. Cody, Christine, and her branch of the family head to Vegas before the Browns ever let us know they're moving there. I wonder why they chose the City of Sin out of all the places they could choose to move, when their faith espouses the high morals and ethics superior to the rest of the mere mortals of the world. I found that to be an interesting choice, but I could also see how Vegas appears to be more liberal, hence more accepting of different lifestyles. But it's interesting, they moved somewhere very close to the drugs and drinking and gambling and showgirls. They want the exact opposite environment and a wholesome community. I'm not knocking Vegas. I don't think it's some evil, sinful place. And if you want to find drugs or parties or gambling or women of the night, you can find it in bumfuck nowhere or in the big cities or tourist spots. It doesn't matter where you go. If that's what you're looking for, seek and ye shall find. But I think it's interesting they picked Vegas, where what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. A place famous for the fast life and the fun, more than the wholesome morals. The episode opens with Cody packing frantically. He announces he's taking Christine to Vegas because they need a trip away, and they wanted to take a trip with her kids and nobody else. So even in season 2, Cody's kids with Christine are referred to as her kids. Why didn't Cody say, "We wanted to take a trip with our kids"? I always find it odd how he only takes ownership of Robyn's kids, referring to them as his kids or our kids. And I never noticed it until later seasons, him primarily referring to Christine's kids or Janelle's kids as Christine or Janelle's kids solely, never saying my kids or our kids, attaching himself to them. He seems to want to distance himself. I never noticed he did it this early on in season 2. Christine loves Vegas, and Cody says Vegas is close, it's exciting, and it's inexpensive. Cody has on an Affliction shirt on a hanger, and it is so tacky. It's a button-up shirt with a huge logo on the back, and he has about 4 different shirts he wears, different Affliction shirts with basically the exact same look, the button-up shirt with the huge Affliction logo on the back. And I really think that the Affliction store had a sale because this guy, the outlet must have had a freaking fire sale. This guy is doing an Affliction fashion show for us in this episode. The type of men who wear Affliction are screaming out their insecurities, in my opinion. It's like the shorter men who drive the huge lifted trucks to try and compensate, when they would appear much more confident and look way better if they just get good with themselves, as they are. They drive to Vegas, and it's 6 hours away from Utah, and it's snowing in Utah. So everyone will be glad to head to Vegas, where there's not a snowflake in sight. Christine says the reason it's important to her to have she and Cody just take their kids is that it's important to establish that, yes, they do have a big family, but they have individual, separate families, and it's good to connect. Notice that Christine says our kids when referring to her kids with Cody. I just want to point out when she mentions her kids with Cody, she doesn't just say my kids, she includes Cody as their father, calling them our kids. It's Cody who chooses to exclude himself when he refers to his kids as her kids. I find it interesting. Imagine if Christine only referred to her kids as Cody's kids all the time, never saying my kids or our kids. Wouldn't that feel odd and cold and distant if they were just Cody's kids? I also want to point out that in monogamy, you don't have to worry about establishing the individual separate families and get trips here and there sporadically with just your individual family unit whenever it's your turn. That gets to happen all the time. Every family vacation is a vacation with your family, and it's not a rare thing. Every family trip gets to be a trip with you and your kids and your husband, so they aren't as few and far between because you aren't waiting for your turn to a family trip. Anyways, everybody gets piled into the car, and Cody suggests, as he's saying goodbye to Mary, that Mary can take his suit to the dry cleaners as he's leaving. Mary tells Cody she loves him, but she's not messing with the dry cleaners this weekend. She has too much partying to do. If it's Cody's own suit he wants dry cleaned, why can't he put it in his two-door Lexus convertible and drive his merry self to the dry cleaners? Why should his wives do it? He has legs and a car. Does Mary ever ask Cody to take her cocktail dress to get dry cleaned? If she did need a garment dry cleaned, would Cody go do it under any circumstances, I wonder? Cody gave Mary a kiss goodbye, and every time he kisses her, even just a quick peck, first of all, it looks awkward. Second, it feels like the Twilight Zone, knowing he can't even hug her now. It feels like I'm almost watching different people in a different show. Mary explains that Christine needed time away, and when Mary found out that they were going, she thought, cool, I've got a weekend of freedom to play and to do whatever it is that I want to do. Mary asks, what is it? When the cat's away, the dogs will play, the mice will play? She isn't sure. She asks, what is it? Somebody. She says, anyways, when he's gone, she's playing, and she can play in his car. It's when the cat's away, the mice will play. But she used the phrase in the right context at least. It's better than Robyn, who uses kickback for pushback and adversary for adversity. Christine explains that she was the last wife, and she has been the last wife for 16 years. And so when other women would talk about a new wife coming into the family and how hard it was, she thought they were being ridiculous. She says when Cody started courting Robyn and she started to feel threatened, started to feel abandoned, and she started to feel insecure and not special, and she started to feel like that, like those other women, it was a shock, and it shocked her that Cody felt he had to get married again. It was a shock. She felt like, wow, suddenly I'm not enough. And she explains, you go through kind of a mourning process, because what you knew, it just didn't feel like it existed anymore. She says it was really difficult. Cody in this scene has his arm around Christine on the confessional couch, and you can tell he hates what Christine is saying. He first glares at her quickly, raising his eyebrows in alarm, and then he is just looking off in the distance with this faraway 1,000-yard stare, looking off for an eternity, not even acknowledging his wife or looking anywhere near her, just focusing in the distance as she discusses her emotions and feelings. He's totally checked out, and it's obvious, written all over his face, in his expression in his eyes, that he's not wanting to hear it, he's going someplace else to avoid it, and it's super obvious on his face. Cody shows not a shred of compassion or concern or validation or engagement with what Christine is saying. Nothing. Just a blank, dismissive gaze, completely in the distance as she speaks, not a shred of acknowledgement in him because he doesn't like her words. And just a side note, but what is up with his ridiculous sideburns angled halfway down his cheeks diagonally? It looks so weird. The way Cody avoids looking at Christine makes his sideburns really apparent because he has his face turned away from her and they're just very prominent on camera on full display, so I noticed them. I'm going to talk a little about my thoughts on what Christine said. Now, we know she always wanted to be the third wife, and she probably imagined being the final wife, the last wife, who would never have to deal with her husband taking on another wife, a younger, newer wife. She thought she was it, and I don't think it ever crossed her mind Cody would ever add more wives. I don't think she ever expected having to experience how it feels to experience a changing dynamic or not being the newest wife, the last wife. I do think wanting to avoid experiencing the emotional upset that comes with adding a new wife to an existing family had a lot to do with why Christine knew she always wanted to experience being a third wife, because she didn't want to experience all that added upset and suffering and turmoil and jealousy and insecurity. So she was shocked by Cody courting Robyn. But we also know from the show that Christine felt out of the loop during the whole courtship. She hadn't met Robyn at all for 3 or 4 weeks after Mary and Cody met her. And so Robyn coming along made her mad because she hadn't met her yet, and Cody was going on and on about Robyn. So he prayed about Robyn. He got a testimony that Robyn is someone he wants in the family. On the show, Cody says Mary introduced Robyn to him, and Mary and Robyn developed a bond. There was a spiritual drive that said to Mary, this is someone that will be a part of your life. Mary felt the same as Cody, hook, line, and sinker. She was sold. Christine was panicking because she never met her yet. She doesn't know what Robyn was like. She never had ever even seen Robyn. She's also pregnant with Cody's child as all this is happening, mind you. Christine thought it was horrible. During the courtship phase, when Cody would leave for weekends since Robyn lived 5 hours away, a couple times she told Cody, he can't go. You can't leave me. You can't leave your family. Christine said it felt like Cody was replacing his family with Robyn and her kids. She says it was hard. She realized it needed to happen, Cody leaving and going to be with Robyn. She says knowing it needed to happen didn't make it easier. So Christine had a very terrible time and a lot of suffering and anguish during this courtship phase. And she was blindsided by it because she only found out about Robyn 3 or 4 weeks after Cody and Mary had started the process. Season 1, Christine says if she were to get jealous of anything, it would be that Robyn is so sweet and such a good companion. And she might feel she is being replaced on the companion side of it. Felt during this courting process while pregnant that she lost her best friend. So Christine was very blindsided because she hadn't met Robyn up until 3 or 4 weeks into Cody and Mary's relationship with her. And she found out about Robyn after Cody, Mary, and Robyn met and basically started communicating and developing something. So she had a right to feel shocked and to feel blindsided and devastated by this. Cody had a testimony from God, and Mary said she had a spiritual drive that Robyn would be a part of her life. So when you live polygamy for faith-based reasons and the husband and first wife feel this spiritual energy that this new wife will be a part of the family as a second wife or a third wife, you don't really have a say or an option but to go with it or leave the whole family and the marriage. And you can't say God's wrong, I don't feel it, and expect your voice to be heard and expect your voice to matter. I don't think in Cody's family, taking on a new wife or a new courtship has to be a unanimous vote or that there's even a vote about it at all. If you do voice your opposition, my guess is you are told to go pray about it so God sends you a testimony or changes your heart. Or of course, you can always leave the family. Christine didn't know of Robyn until it was already started and she only met her a month in. And Mary would drop encouragements with Janelle and Christine saying, we should add a wife. And then suddenly Cody was in a courtship backed by a spiritual testimony for him and a spiritual drive from Mary, the first wife. If a pregnant Christine firmly disagreed, they wouldn't pump the brakes on the courtship. Her only choice would probably be to divorce. I don't think all the wives get equal say or that their voices all matter or are heard. And in faith-based situations like that, it's probably sacrilege to say, well, Cody feels God in it, Mary feels a spiritual drive, but I don't feel it. If you say you don't feel it, you don't think it's from God, you don't think it's right, then you're probably told to go pray on it and open your heart to let God answer. So I can understand how Christine felt completely. It's have been a shock to learn about this woman after it began and only meet her a month in. After, it's already a quarter of the typical courtship's way into it. A month is like a year of dating in the normal world. Polygamous courtships are only 2, 3, or 4 months long typically, and Robyn had a longer courtship than most at around 9 months, if I recall correctly. But when you date or court, in polygamy, it means if all goes well, you're tying the knot. And by the point of a month in, they knew it was good to go. And only then was Robyn introduced to Christine. And by then, it was developed and established between Robyn and Cody and Mary. So Janelle and Christine didn't really have a say. It's accept it or divorce. And a pregnant mother of 5 can't exactly say hasta la vista if she has no job or place to live or support system outside of that family structure. She wasn't forced to accept, but even if she wanted to leave, in some ways her hands were tied. It's a lot to leave the only support system you have. And Christine was the heart of the family who was incredibly intertwined with Janelle and her kids. It's not so easy to just leave. And while pregnant on top of that. So even if you voice your opposition, I don't feel it will change anything. As they're headed to Vegas, Christine tells Cody she has been looking forward to this trip forever. And she's way excited. She thanks him and tells him she appreciates it. Cody says this trip was also very important because he and Christine needed to move themselves away from the investigation and all that stuff. Christine says they can put it on the back burner for a little while. Unless there was any type of welfare fraud or abuse going on, the Browns had nothing to fear, in my opinion. I understand technically under the law they can jail Cody, give him a light sentence, fine him, possibly jail his spiritual wives and put his tribe of kids in foster care. But in this case, they weren't planning on doing that, in my opinion. They were investigating as a formality because Cody and his wives were flaunting the lifestyle on a reality show in everyone's faces. And technically, under the law in their state, back then, it was illegal. So they did start an investigation. If they had not investigated it, it would appear that law enforcement was giving the Browns preferential treatment. They treated the Browns the same as all the other polygamous families and investigated it as a mere formality. And beyond Cody getting a slap on the wrist, unless there was abuse or fraud involved, there was nothing to fear. They weren't going to jail his wives or burden the foster care system. They can see that his kids are all well taken care of. It's not abusive. And Cody might get a fine, if that. I doubt he'd get any time. It was never this huge threat for the Brown family, in my opinion. But they want to justify the Vegas move and make it dramatic. So here they are taking this vacation to get away from the stress and the burden of this investigation. That is really a formality. Janelle explains that Christine has needed a trip for a long time. She's had a baby and there's been a lot of change in the family. Robyn always interrupts to parrot whatever a wife is saying and stop them from speaking. And it's so annoying and a regular occurrence during confessional scenes, especially with the other wives. If I was a wife, I'd explain to her, listen, when we're sitting on that couch and the producer asks me to speak on something, I'm going to speak on it. And when I'm done, then say whatever you like, but you're not going to interrupt me. But every episode she interrupts with just repeating what someone else said or nonsense words with no substance just to hear herself speak. She just wants to be heard, but she has nothing revolutionary to add to the conversation, nothing of substance. Here, Robyn starts interrupting Janelle, saying, yeah, truly. And Janelle puts her hands out and she looks annoyed at Robyn and she keeps speaking, so Robyn dips it. Janelle continues on that Christine's life is absorbed into hers, and she imagines maybe Robyn and Mary feel the same way. Janelle says when Christine is gone, her whole world falls apart. And she is like, what? Savannah has to have her hair combed before school? Christine is really like the caregiver and the nurturer and the mom of Janelle's kids. And Janelle seems so consumed with work that she has no idea what her kids need to get ready for school or their schedule or routine. For her whole world to fall apart when Christine is gone, that means she is lost. She doesn't know how to do the caregiving and the routine. How can she be so surprised that she has to brush her daughter's hair before school? Christine is almost like her wife, who does everything in her home while she goes off to work and she comes back having no clue what the wife does, how demanding it is, or what the actual routine is. She just goes to work. And I'm not at all suggesting Janelle and Christine are romantic. No way at all. No way at all. I just want to stress that here because I don't want anyone to run with it. They are like sisters and the true epitome of what a sister-wives relationship should look like, in my opinion. But I just wanted to give an example of a couple when one partner works and the other stays home, and the working partner has no concept of how the routine goes at home or what the stay-at-home partner does in a day. So if that partner is sick, they are then left overwhelmed and in the dark, not knowing how to function. And that's how Janelle seems. So it shows you just how much Christine does. Robyn says, truly has been a big change for Christine. And she says, you know, when you're older, I've heard it's hard to have babies. Janelle's face when Robyn says this, you can see the contempt, and Mary isn't too happy with it either. Robyn is no spring chicken. She is 30 or 31 at this point, and she acts like she's 18. Christine is maybe 6 years older than her at most, and she is referring to Christine as older. She's middle-aged herself, and she acts like she's so much younger. But even at 30 or 31, it's getting up there where you have to watch out during pregnancy. So that was really rude and insensitive. I love that of all the wives, she is the one who ages worse and behaves the most curmudgeonly. Janelle has fun. She looks glowy and vibrant. She goes to rock shows. Christine is glowy and vibrant as well. Even Mary. And Robyn looks and acts and dresses way older than them. So she's one to talk. Christine is maybe 6 years older than Robyn at most. What a smug attitude. Oh, I've heard when you're older. She herself is older. She's 31. It's not young anymore or anywhere near youthful. That's the pot calling the kettle black. She's acting like she just turned 21. I didn't like that comment, that little dig. Oh, I've heard it's harder when you're older, to have babies. What does that even have to do with the topic of conversation at hand? Other than just to hear yourself talk and take a slight dig at Christine. Janelle was saying her world falls apart without Christine. And Robyn chimes in, truly is a big change. It's harder to have babies when you're older. Listen, Christine was able to take care of her 6 kids and Janelle's 6 kids as a full-time caregiver, doing the routine, getting them up and ready for school and fed, and doing the house chores, and the shopping, and the cooking, and the homework. She had no problem handling it like a fucking rock star. Meanwhile, Robyn has 3 grown kids, plus herself and Cody in her home, and she has 2 kids. Saul is now 10, and Ari is 6, and she still needs a nanny to help her with her kids. Christine did caregiving for 12 kids at a time, plus the housework, shopping, and cooking, and chores, everything that has to do with that. When she was overwhelmed and she asked for help, she was told it's her end of the deal to uphold. She isn't getting any help. So I guess an older Christine is much more capable of parenting, caregiving, cooking, and housework than Robyn at her tender ages, and Christine did it all without a nanny. Robyn has 5 adults in her home, a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, and she needs a nanny? Why is Christine more capable and equipped to handle all that responsibility single-handedly, while Robyn isn't? She needs a nanny brought in. Make that make sense. Anyways, back to the show. Christine establishes some ground rules for the 6-hour car ride to Vegas with 5 kids and a baby. She warns the kids, absolutely no what game, no slug bug, because she doesn't want hitting. Christine explains when they are driving and traveling, there are times when she's just giving ultimatums. Christine says flying is expensive, and Cody agrees. They have to drive everywhere they go. He says if you got a $300 ticket per kid, that's a $2,000 trip versus a $500 trip. Christine says it's a lot cheaper to drive. Cody says that's why he likes Vegas, because it's fairly close, it's not too long a trip, and yet it gives you enough time to just get in the groove of travel and to visit with the kids a little bit and to hear them screaming in the back. He says there's a lot of things going on. Robyn says it's always nice to have time alone with Cody. She would know she got more one-on-one, uninterrupted alone time with him than any one of his other wives and kids, short of Mary, who lived monogamously with him as first wife for 3 years. Robyn says it's always nice to have him there. She's not going to say that it's not great, because it is, but it's also really fun to sit there and have her me time, and she thinks me time and alone time is super awesome. The wives back at home go to a bakery together. Janelle says Cody isn't a lot of work. Then she reverses and says, well, Cody's a little work, but he's not a lot of work. He's fun to have around. She doesn't know what it is about just being home with just her kids. Robyn says she couldn't imagine actually having a husband around all the time. It'd be kind of weird. Really? It would be kind of weird? Robyn gladly lived monogamy with Cody for at least 9 or 10 months during the pandemic. She also said she doesn't like her kids to get anxious, so she doesn't like Cody gone for more than 2 days at a time. She also lived monogamy with her husband for years before she divorced him, so would it be weird? I wonder. It didn't seem too weird for her to live in monogamy during the pandemic, and she didn't seem too put upon. She also never lived polygamy herself before this. All she has ever known was a monogamous relationship for herself, and she did grow up in a polygamist family, but she never lived polygamy for herself as a polygamist wife. All she has ever known was a monogamous relationship as far as being a wife, and she has only been married to Cody 5 months per last episode. So, going from living in a monogamous marriage for years was all she ever knew. Then she lived alone for a time. Then She courted Cody for 9 months and married him, and it's 5 months in to their marriage per last episode. They wed 5 months ago, so now all of a sudden she can't imagine having a husband around all the time. It would be weird. Interesting, when previous to this, her only other marriage was a monogamous one. And later on, she's going to admit this. And then she lived monogamously with Cody for at least 9 or 10 months, and we haven't seen next season yet to know if that has continued more or less. Finally, Christine, Cody, and the kids see the lights of Vegas in the distance after driving all day. It's night now. Cody says Vegas has a huge Christian population and it's called Sin City, but that's just because of the Strip. I wonder if Cody knew previous to this that he wanted to relocate to Vegas, and he has to make Vegas seem like it jives with his faith and his lifestyles and his high morality and ethics. So he's now explaining the large Christian population to try and qualify it. Christians and FLDS are different. How many FLDS church members live in Vegas, I wonder? Now that the Browns moved, I'm guessing it's 0 or at least double digits and low double digits. Christine says Vegas has a lot of options and she likes options. Browns are staying at Lowe's Lake, Las Vegas, and they have never been there before. Cody had never even heard of Lake Las Vegas. Christine says the resort took their breath away. She felt they weren't dressed nice enough to be there. To me, it looks like a normal resort or hotel or timeshare, in my opinion. It doesn't seem that fancy. It's a typical resort hotel in a tourist spot. It looks, there's all kinds of timeshares and resorts like that in Cabo, in Palm Springs, in Vegas. It's pretty generic actually, but I guess they feel that it's fancy. Cody explains that they are 30 minutes outside of downtown Las Vegas, and because they got a good deal on it, they had no idea it would be this nice. Cody explains it's off season, so they had this really good deal. Cody says it's quiet. There's not a lot of people. They go to their room and it was a flippin' villa. And he is giddy with excitement, smiling and giggling, talking about the villa. It's not a villa. It's a hotel suite that has like a little living room area and adjoining rooms. That's what a normal suite looks like. It's not a villa. It was a nice normal hotel suite and a typical, resort hotel. It wasn't anything like, lifestyles of the rich and famous, but that's how they were acting about it. So Christine is marveling at how huge it is. She says the kids went nuts. The next morning they woke up because they got to the hotel at nighttime and they wanted to scope the place out. So they went for a little walk on the grounds and they got to Lake Las Vegas. And Cody knows how to skip stones from growing up on the farm. And he teaches the kids how to skip stones on the lake. And he's instructing them to find a flat rock. Christine jokes she didn't know he was a pro rock skipper. And if she had known before they got married, it would have been a done deal. Robyn says Cody is sweet with each one of them when they are all together. But then when it's just you and him and your kids, they get to see that marriage and the strength of that marriage a lot better and a lot clearer because they're more connected when they are separate from the rest of them. Cody says the real important thing is that each individual relationship in the marriage gets nurtured. Mary, Janelle, and Robyn decided they wanted to have some fun while Cody, Christine, and their kids were gone, so they took the rest of the kids bowling. Mary asks who wants to go with Robyn as they're trying to get everyone into cars, and not one of the kids volunteers. So Dayton and Brianna go hug their mom. Robyn says coming into this family for her kids has definitely been difficult for them. It's definitely been a complete culture change for them. They went from a monogamous home with a father and a mother and them, and now they have a father that's there who has a lot of other people that he needs to connect with as well. But it's very, very positive for them how much Cody loves this family. See how earlier Robyn said she couldn't imagine actually having a husband around all the time? It would be kind of weird. Here she admits just minutes later in the episode that all her kids have ever known is monogamy. So her kids need to adjust to polygamy. But for Robyn, who has only courted Cody for 9 months and who has been married for 5 months at this point, she already Couldn't imagine having a husband around all the time. It would be weird. When just like her kids, she has only ever lived monogamously herself as a wife. She grew up in polygamy, but she herself never lived in a marriage before Cody, other than with one husband who was always around. But all of a sudden, monogamy would be weird and she can't imagine it. Also, that she refers to Cody as her kid's father. I want to speak on that for a little bit. She and Cody have only been married 5 months and courted for 9 months. So the kids probably knew Cody less than 14 months. But she is referring to Cody as their father. And this was before he adopted them. And they have a biological father. Yet she takes the father title and places it on Cody. She says it here. She says, now they have a father that's there. And she encourages her kids many times on the show to call Cody dad. She doesn't just let the kids decide what they prefer from themselves. She encourages it. And here, 5 months into marriage, Cody is their father, as if their bio dad never existed and isn't their father. In my opinion, I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that's a healthy way to go about it. Even if this guy is a total scumbag, he will always be their father and he will always share their DNA. And Robyn tries to erase it and push the kids to call Cody dad several times. There's the incident where she pointed to Cody's pic and asked her child, Brianna, who is that? And she said, Cody. And Robyn asked again, who? In a tone. And the child corrected it to dad. There's also the bizarro weird drawing where she took a photo of her kids with their bio dad, and she took a younger photo of Cody with Christine's kids, and she had an artist draw the photo of her original family with a younger Cody. And I found that disrespectful both to Christine's kids and to the bio dad of her kids. And it's creepy to rewrite history that way. I'm sure she wishes Cody was their dad and the father of her children. I get that. And she meant it to be sweet and sentimental, I'm sure. But in my mind, it was creepy AF and bizarre. If the kids feel Cody is a secondary father figure to them and they call him dad naturally of themselves, it's one thing. But for Robyn to push it with her kids, and it's also just 5 months into the marriage and 9 months into the courtship. After 14 months, she wants to push it with her kids and she wants them to refer to Cody as their father, even pre-adoption. It's weird and it's wrong and it's disrespectful to both her kids and their biological father, and it's very dismissive of the biological father, whose DNA they will always share, whether they're adopted or not. It should be up to the kids and it shouldn't be pushed or suggested even, in my opinion. Anyways, Robyn says the kids loved bowling. She's even all smiles talking about it. Janelle calls out Robyn for using bumpers, and Robyn admits it, and Janelle says she should have used bumpers herself. Robyn points out she tied for score with Mary, and Mary reminds her, but you used bumpers. And Robyn says it doesn't matter, the score was tied, it's all in the numbers. So that shows you the high morals and ethics. She's making such a big deal. And I know it's just in jest, but she used bumpers, which is basically the kiddie way to bowl. It's not really the same as playing without bumpers. And she tied a score with Mary when Mary didn't need any additional help. And she did it all with her own bowling skills. So it really does matter. And it's unfair to want to say that you tied scores with someone when you had a leg up in the situation. So that just shows another example of the high morals and ethics. She can't just say, Mary, wow, you're such a great bowler, you won. And said, oh, I tied the score with you. It's just odd. And I know she's just joking and trying to be cute and funny, but it's not. Mary says when you're older than 10, it doesn't count if you use the bumpers. And I have to agree. Hunter says Mary has impressed him the most with her bowling skills because she has a strike and he doesn't. Back in Vegas, the family decides to go to Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. And Christine has always wanted to go there, and it's amazing to her what they can do with wax. There are wax figures of Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. In my opinion, it's creepy AF. Christine says the Brad Pitt one freaked her out. And Cody mentions the wedding thing, and Christine explains there's a wedding dress you can put on to get married to George Clooney. Okay, this is the weird thing that I remembered at the wax museum, but it's not with Cody. It's Gwen. She has on the wedding dress 10 sizes too big for her, and she is posing next to the creepy wax figure of George Clooney. And she looks so displeased, like she's being like held against her will in her eyes to be taking that picture. She might just be trolling to do a funny picture, and I think that's probably what she was doing. But to me, she really like didn't look happy in that gargantuan wedding dress taking that photo next to a creepy waxed George Clooney. For some reason, I knew something from the wax museum stuck out to me, and I erroneously thought Cody did something awkward because it's usually him. But it wasn't Cody, it was Gwen. Her expression was, "Please get me out of here." And I loved it. I'm sure most fans take smiling, happy photos next to George, not Gwendolyn, and I got a kick out of it. I like her personality. Cody explains it's perfect. Wax museums should be a little bit creepy. For once in my life, I agree with Cody. It's creepy to the max, and I would never want to go see one. I'm also going to give Cody credit on something else in a few, and you've got to give credit where it's due, even if you aren't a fan. Fair is fair. I noticed Cody in another button-up Affliction shirt, by the way. I feel like most of his wardrobe is comprised of button-up shirts with huge Affliction logos on the back. I never understood brands. Why do you want to work to buy a shirt to be a free advertisement for a brand? That kind of stuff doesn't make sense to me at all. Why are you slaving away at work to make money to then pay for something to serve as free advertising for a brand because it's a type of status symbol in society? The whole thing is ridiculous to me. It's not that I won't buy brand name stuff, but I don't care to advertise some multi-million-dollar company's logo on my body for free and pay for it too. Why? To what end? So people can look at me and see I paid to wear that brand? Anyways, I don't want to digress. Christine says the kids love the wax museum. All of a sudden, the background music changes to something heavier and the tone goes from fun at bowling and the wax museum to somber and heavy. And Mary says, people are upset that they have brought children into this relationship and they didn't have any choice. They didn't have a choice to live polygamy, but every child who is born is brought into a family and no child has a choice of what they are brought into. Mary says, hopefully they have raised their kids to be able to choose what it is that they want. Janelle is mad. She feels like they are going to raise their children according to their beliefs, and they wouldn't be their beliefs if they didn't raise their children according to what they believe about how the universe works. Cody thinks they've raised their children extremely open-mindedly. They've never pushed their dogma that this is a better way. He tries to teach his kids specifically, like the 10 Commandments. You cannot harm another. It's wrong. He hopes they choose a way, a dogma, that makes them happy and that makes God happy. I agree with Mary that no kid has a choice of what they are brought into, and with Cody again, as far as raising their children to be open-minded. None of the kids have chosen to live polygamy, and Mariah was able to come out and be accepted by her family, and all the other brown kids are all allowed to make their own personal choices of faith or lifestyle, whatever they want to do, and they're accepted. So the parents are very open-minded with their kids and accepting of their kids' choices, and that's something I have to give them credit for. So I credit Cody and Christine and Mary and Janelle for that, because not all parents say, be a good person, go where you feel is right, do what is authentic to you, and we will accept what you choose, but be good and do no harm. And I so appreciate that, and I think that's great. That's wonderful, in fact. Back to the Affliction shirts just for a second. All Cody owns are Affliction shirts in different colors, and today he is in a new third Affliction shirt. I don't know if it's a third or fourth, actually. It's a black Affliction shirt that looks almost exact to the pale blue one he wore at the Wax Museum. And I wonder if the Affliction outlet had a sale or something. Is Affliction sponsoring Cody? I wonder, does he get a paycheck from Affliction to wear their shirts on the show? It's their second day in Vegas, and the kids are having a great time, and they're going to have a continental-style breakfast with stuff they brought to their hotel room to save money. Christine says she likes to give her kids a substantial breakfast, but there was only a microwave, and she doesn't have microwave skills because microwaves shoot harmful chemicals and radiation everywhere. Cody is smiling. He says Christine doesn't have a microwave at home, so using a microwave at their hotel was just not functional. So they had cold cereal and yogurt and juice. Christine doesn't know how to make an egg in the microwave, and Cody asks, who does? Christine tells Cody Robyn knows how, and she told Christine how to do it later on. Cody is shocked. He asks, really? You can make an egg in the microwave? And Christine confirms, you indeed can make eggs in the microwave. Of course, you can more or less make anything you want in the microwave, and you can make an egg in the microwave. It won't taste as good, and it won't be the same texture as cooking it on the stove, but of course it can be done. I prefer the stove, but if you go to places like Einstein Bagel, for example, and you get an egg bagel sandwich, pay attention to how they make the eggs next time. They definitely make them in the microwave. Christine wouldn't want to serve that to her kids because she says it's harmful radiation through the microwave. During breakfast, Cody gets up to make a call to Mary to connect and see what's going on. Cody is on the phone with Mary, saying to Mary, so you didn't get that position? And he then says, tell me about that. Mary explains when Cody called her that day, she had to break the news to him that she had been declined for this position she had applied for. Mary had been looking for work for a while since she had been let go of her other job. Mary explains she had this great job that she loved, that she was good at. And about the time they went to New York and they became public, management pulled her into the office and told her they were going to release her from her position at work, and they fired her. She was shocked. It was a serious blow, and it surprised her. Cody tells Mary on the phone his mind is running. It's running 1,000,000 miles an hour, telling him, thinking about all the decisions that have to be made. Mary says she felt a little bit like, because of her lifestyle, they're letting her go. And she says, really? Mary wants to work with at-risk youth, and she worries that now she is such a public figure that it's going to inhibit her chances of finding work in that field. Mary says she's not a bad person. She just has sister wives, and she gets fired for it. It pisses her off. She says this is exactly why polygamists hide who they are. She says if she had gone on hiding for the rest of her life, she would have kept that job. Okay, so first of all, if Mary lost her job because of her lifestyle, that is completely effed up and wrong and unfair to let someone go for the lifestyle they chose or the faith that they live out. It should never have happened. But if Mary wants to work with at-risk youth, my guess is it's not about her lifestyle at all. I think it's about her being a public figure on a reality show. Working with at-risk youth is a private, confidential, sensitive thing. And a public figure on a reality show in a position like that, it might affect how the youth relate to her. And I'm sure a counselor's outside life should be private for a job of that nature, especially when dealing with at-risk youth. And in my opinion, the reason they fired Mary wasn't about polygamy or her faith. It's the fact that now she is a public figure publicizing her whole life, and it could affect her job to some degree and how she does her job. If it truly was about polygamy, she should not have been fired, of course. But I think it's about having a job as a public figure on a reality show. It becomes problematic in that respect with the type of work that she does. I think if Mary came out as a polygamist, but she wasn't a public figure on television, she would still have her job and it would be no issue at all, to be honest. This narrative that if she stayed hidden in the shadows, hiding her lifestyle, she'd keep her job, is false in my opinion, or at least not the full picture. If her coworkers and boss were told by her, by the way, I'm a polygamist, and she was not a public figure living her life in front of the cameras, I believe she'd have her job and also be able to be true to herself and make it known that she was a polygamist. I think this is about her being a public figure on a reality show and that conflicting to some degree with the nature of her work. I don't think it was about the lifestyle she lived at all, but I think Mary capitalized on it, saying that's why she was fired and that if she stayed quiet, she would have kept her job. And that's why all the other polygamists hide in the shadows, because it's good to push the narrative of the fear and the investigation and the bias and this pervasive fear in their lives, that this threat that Cody will go to jail and the wives might go to jail and his kids might be put in the foster system. They have to make it real and heavy and anxiety laden. I will say this, I do believe some polygamists would be discriminated against and that there was fear historically and thousands of instances, if not more, of families being separated in the past, in history, of course. And that fear was real and the threat as well. But in this case, I do think her firing was about Mary being a public figure on a reality show, not because she is a polygamist. But she focused on it being because she was a polygamist, because it fits the threat narrative and the investigation and the storyline and the drummed up drama. And Cody pulls the thread some more, saying it's stressful. He has legal fears. If Mary really was fired for polygamy, of course it's wrong and discriminatory, and I want to stress that. But I think with her sensitive line of work, it was about her being a public figure now. And I think Cody complaining of the stress of the investigation and the fear and the threat, when he isn't under any actual threat, his family and wives won't be separated, and he knows that he is milking this, and he's milking the threat and his wives as well. Janelle said she was fearful of the cops last week. Mary is saying she lost her job. Cody says he is fearful and stressed by the legal threats, and they will use this as the excuse to move. And Cody knew he would move to Vegas before announcing it, because this episode, he made a point to point out, they call Vegas Sin City for just the Strip, but there is actually a large Christian community here to set the stage for the move to Vegas, in my opinion. On the last day of the vacation, they decided to go on a boat ride on Lake Las Vegas. Christine says the boat trip was the highlight for her. She loved it. Cody says it was the golf cart of boats. It was easy. Janelle says their children have grown up as a whole family, and Cody agrees. The kids don't sit there. Logan doesn't sit there and go, Dad's off with Christine and her kids again. Robyn says the public is going, wait a minute, you've got a father of 16. He is so stretched thin. How are these kids actually getting what they need out of a father? Janelle says Cody has the same 24 hours in a day that any other man does, but he just chooses to use it a little bit differently. He doesn't disappear into his man cave. What is the fifth house Cody wants for himself as his own separate house on Coyote Pass? When he divided the land with the surveyor, he said he was getting a fifth house. What is that equivalent to? He's not only getting a man cave, he's getting a whole house. Robyn says he doesn't go golfing. Janelle says Cody doesn't golf. He doesn't do those things. He doesn't have time. Cody says Janelle is very sweet about this, but he's no perfect father, but he does try. Well, not anymore. He stopped even making phone calls to his kids that he feels disobey him when they don't blindly obey him. He won't even make contact with them anymore when he was living in monogamy at Robyn's house during the 9 to 10 month monogamous stay. He refused to go to Isabel's surgery. He refused to see his kids, pinning it on his wife's irresponsible behavior during C19. He does all kinds of things that are really, really, really not indicative of him trying as a father. Christine and Cody go to dinner alone at the hotel restaurant after the boat ride, and Cody is in his 4th or 5th Affliction button down this time, and it's a black and white stripe with a huge logo on the back. Cody says it was very romantic. Christine says it was just the two of them. Cody tells her the day has been wonderful. Christine says the kids have been really good. Cody says it's been fun. Cody says he and Christine have been married for almost 17 years. And out of those 17 years, they've probably had maybe 3 years that struggled. And they show different family photos of Christine and Cody over the years as we hear this and soft music. Christine says most of it has just been absolute bliss, really. She says this past year has been a lot of struggle. There have been a lot of changes and a lot of new things happening, and they've had quite the change in their relationship. And the trip helped them to get back together and to reconnect. But it's not fixed perfectly. Cody says it was an investment in their future. He says when you've got a marriage, it's called investments. You've got to fill that bank account of love. I just want to point out that at the romantic dinner, Cody has a glass of red wine. So I'm not sure if alcohol is off limits for the FLDS or not. I was under the impression from later episodes that alcohol is off limits, but here Cody has a glass of red wine. so I could be mistaken. Christine is explaining to Cody that she runs on high adrenaline all of the time. Cody says this trip was also very important because he and Christine needed to move themselves away from the investigation and the legal issues. Cody says it's so morally wrong. He says there is stress with a potential threat to your family and a lot of unknowns, and there's an investigation being done, so they just needed to be able to unwind with each other. Christine says it's been a wonderful weekend. She could stay there longer, but she is okay to go home tomorrow. She says there are good days and bad days. There was a time when she really didn't know if doing this, the TV show and coming out as polygamists, was a good move for their family. Cody says when the threat is heavy, you feel like running away. So Christine didn't think it was a good move, but now she is very glad that they decided to go public with their lifestyle. She's very glad they did that. And Cody thinks they've changed all of society on some levels, and Christine thinks so too. She says now she realizes there's a looming potential threat, but she thinks that them going forward and them being public and sharing their family, she thinks it's impacted some people. There are people that they've met that have come up to them and said, thank you for doing this and we support you. Cody says it's changed their perspective and it's opened their minds and shown them a viewpoint. Cody says they've had people come up to them and say they better leave you alone. You have the most wonderful family. Cody says they are trying to show family, and it ends with a close-up of a Brown family photo. So, does Cody have a wonderful family, or are his wives obstacles to his goals in life? As he said last season, I feel like without Cody's wives, he wouldn't have his kids and he wouldn't have his family or a show to showboat on with a TLC paycheck. Nothing Cody has now would exist without them. So does he regret his kids, his family, his wives? His goals must not be his family or his kids if his wives are obstacles to what he hopes to achieve and attain in life. So here he says, people think his family is wonderful. He's changed people's viewpoints. Now, last season, he says his wives are obstacles to his goals. And if there were no wives, if he overcomes the obstacle of his wives, he can have his goals. So I want to know, what are his goals if it's not his wonderful family? The fans tell Cody he has. Since his wives are obstacles to what he hopes to reach in life, what is that? Because he would have none of what he has now without them. After Cody's toxic, abusive, and manipulative behavior, even if it changed people's perspectives for a time, seeing Cody mask off and the way he executes the lifestyle with manipulation and neglect, trying to lord over everyone through ego, using abusive tactics, manipulative tactics, and neglect and conditional love to try and get his way, people may think Cody's first 3 wives and original kids are wonderful, but I doubt they think Cody is wonderful or Robyn is wonderful. Cody said this wasn't patriarchal, that this wasn't about ego, that it was all about the team as a whole, and he could never tell his wives what to do. This was never about him, never about his ego. It was never about toxicity or being macho or power. This had nothing to do with him. It had to do with his following his faith. That was his reason. His sole motivation to live this lifestyle was to abide by his faith. So why is everything Cody does reflective of his wants and his selfish needs over those of the team? He said the lifestyle is a lot about sacrifice and foregoing selfishness for the whole team, putting the team first, asking others in the group what they need, even ahead of yourself, and living the faith supposedly enables mere mortals to overcome these obstacles and make each adherent better as a person. But Cody grows increasingly selfish as time ticks on, and Cody seems to grow more resentful, more jaded, more bitter, and filled with contempt. Maybe so much was expected of him that he felt suffocated and strangled by the weight of all the expectation, crushed by the weight, and unsatisfied with his diminished authority and leadership role, selfishly said to himself, now is my time. I want things my way. I want to feel in control of myself, of my time, of my schedule. I'm tired of this chore. I'm tired of this obligation. I can't do it. And I can't divorce my wives, not under the faith, but they can leave me and they love me. They won't go unless I ice them out and I give them motivation to. Now he says his wives are obstacles to his goals in life, that he views some of the relationships as an obligation. He withholds his time and presence and levels of investment unless he gets his way and is blindly obeyed. Did he change people's minds, open their minds to polygamy, and show them a new viewpoint? Or did Cody show them who he was, mask off, a man who can't give equal time to all of his wives, who gives preferential treatment to his favorite wife and kids because they bend to him and give him his way blindly? Does Cody withhold love and investment with his kids who don't blindly obey him when he has unreasonable demands to comply with? Does Cody have one set of standards for one set of adult kids who obey him, who he is happy to have live at home way past 18, while trying to push Janelle to kick out some of his other adult sons who work and go to school? One who was close to saving for a house, saying they're 18, he's done all he can for them, and the reason one set of kids gets different standards to another as far as living at home is their obedience to him. Will the way Cody behaves and the way he executes polygamy change people's minds to make them feel better about it or worse, I wonder? Cody's older adult kids barely speak to him per the tell-all. Cody suggested it was reasonable and rational to ask his 17-year-old daughter to fly to New Jersey in severe pain during a pandemic, completely alone, to do life-threatening surgery because it was inconvenient for him to attend. He tried withholding sex with Christine in an effort to try to leverage intimacy with her as a way to change her behavior with Robyn. And he said his wives are obstacles to his goals in life. Cody did this show to become a polygamist hero for his people, to open minds, and instead, with his abusive, toxic behavior, he made polygamy look unhealthy and toxic, and as a lifestyle in which emotional turmoil and hierarchy and struggle and suffering is inherent. And he keeps saying, our polygamy is different. We are not them. Them in the braids, them in the prairie dresses, them on the compounds, them with the child brides. We are not them with the welfare fraud on the government assistance. We are different. We are not them. But keep in mind, Cody did court a 17-year-old as a grown adult man, and he did wait till she turned 18 to make the engagement official. But a week before the wedding, it was called off. And maybe they don't participate in welfare fraud, but Cody cannot claim all his kids on his health insurance. And Janelle covered her own kids through her work. And Mary was legal wife. So if Christine's kids did not get health insurance through Cody, and she did not get health insurance through her spiritual husband, then she had to get government assistance in the form of at least Medicaid, if we are to believe her and her kids got regular medical care, physicals, and anything else they might need. So in some ways, they aren't a far cry from the other polygamists over there. And I just want to point out that the way Cody lives polygamy isn't necessarily the way the faith deems it be lived, fair and equal. And I'm sure there are healthier examples of faith-based polygamists and polygamists who live that lifestyle as a secular lifestyle choice, who do it in a much healthier way. And I still don't think it's the healthiest lifestyle, but I think it could be done in a little bit of a healthier way to some degree. For example, Joe Darger or Brady Williams, who left the faith but lives a lifestyle out of commitment to his family. And I would love to see more functional examples of the lifestyle with healthier dynamics. I'd still never do it. I still won't find it to be healthy or conducive to happiness, but I do think it's possible to live it better with healthier dynamics than those that we currently see in the Brown family. What I find curious is Cody did this to advocate for the family and for rights. Polygamy in Utah was decriminalized, which is why Cody wanted to do this, to open minds, to change views. Yet with his abusive behavior and manipulative tactics and narcissistic tendencies, he has actually proved that their brand of polygamy isn't a far cry from that other polygamy. And Cody, being a power-hungry, unstable patriarch who will stop at nothing to gain control, has let his mask fall off all the way and proven it's a lifestyle that comes with unrealistic expectations placed on the women and the men too. The lifestyle comes with inherent layers of extra complications, like the hierarchy, the relational dynamics between the wives, between each wife and husband, the husband and the kids, and not everyone gets their voices heard. Cody recently said when it comes to kids needing new shoes or braces, if their mom's budget were thin, the squeakiest wheel gets the grease. With his wives, it's the same. The only voice that gets truly heard and taken into account is that of the wife who is most obedient, the wife who is skilled at cooking those ego feasts, the favorite wife. and that favor extends to the kids of the favorite wife, while other wives' kids get different treatment as well. There are so many more added complications, but Cody has shown his brand of polygamy to be toxic, whether you dress it up nicely and put on modern clothes and you drive a sports car, or you put on a prairie dress and live the lifestyle on the compounds of that other polygamy over there, the one Cody and Robyn say a million times they aren't. That does it for this episode of Sister Wives with Mary Jane K. To my YouTube listeners, please like, subscribe, and let me know what you think of Christine and Cody's Vegas vacation down below in the comment box. I'd love to know your thoughts. I'll be back next week on Wednesday or Thursday for episode 5 of Becoming Sister Wives Book Club, covering the second half of chapter 3 entitled Christine and Cody. And I'll be back Friday or Saturday for the next episode of my Sister Wives Rewatch, Season 2, Episode 6, entitled Polygamous Party. Thanks for listening. Bye.